the thing to me about all of this work,
Right.
you was talking about what I know and what I don't know, is to come at all this stuff humbly.
Right.
Because, and you're much more engaged in the, I think I remember Cecilia telling me there's something called the Poe business.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know shit about any of
Right.
that. Because I've been raising kids
Right.
and had a straight job.
Exactly.
And I had to meet deadlines.
Right.
And I wasn't really that interested. To me,
Right.
poetry was
Right.
more my refuge.
Right. Right.
My uncensored refuge.
Exactly.
That's where I wanted to be.
Yeah.
I could care less, as a rule.
Right.
I mean, you know, and I have been lucky to know you and all these other people all these years. But I'm more interested in what we're doing now to me is hip to me, because this ambition right here.
When you told me you wanted to talk about this poem, I was so surprised.
Why?
I rarely read it in public.
This poem is fantastic
And
to me.
it was an important poem to me personally. But when people pick poems that they like from the book, it's not usually this poem. So I was excited, and I want to know why it affects you that way.
Well, because it's about Pops.
It's about Pops.
And it's about him in a way that just, you don't be talking about fathers like this.
Yeah.
It's a tragic poem.
Yeah, it
It's
is
tragedy.
a tragic poem. Yeah.
You know, and then, you know, see, you know, I'm so into my own vernacular, you know, my core vernacular is so, but I'm going to read you the last poem. He ate nothing but air at all our meals after. And you know, the commas, it threw me.
Right.
It just said, this is the beat of beats here.
That was my Oscar Wilde moment. You know, Oscar Wilde is alleged to have said, "Oh my God, I worked so hard this morning. This morning I put in a comma, and this afternoon I took it out." You know, it was kind of that. It was in, it was out, it was in, it was out. And then I thought, you know what?
Righteous.
No, it needs that beat. And it was such a shock. It's still a shock to think of him living for another 20 years. Without the ability to taste or to smell.
That is giving me chills right now.
And he would say, why doesn't someone just invent a pill? Because eating, how much fun is eating when you can't taste what you're eating?
So wait a minute, some little chump ass.
He was teaching night school at Jefferson High.
What?
Went into the men's room
Probably
on a break.
Little brothers.
Some little brothers, we assume, although they were never caught. And where they hit him is the part of the brain that controls the sense of taste and smell. And it just knocked it out, basically.
How random.
How random is that, you know?
Now, wait a minute, when was he teaching out there?
He taught there till the mid-'60s.
So that was not white, that was after white flight.
Oh, yeah.
And that was,
yeah.
So here's an elder dude from the Caribbean.
Yeah. Exactly, who's not allowed to teach day school, even though he was the equivalent of a superintendent, really, in the islands. But he didn't have the credentials here and all of that. But they did let him teach math at night. So he had a day job. I would see him for half an hour. As a kid, I was thinking about this the other day. I wouldn't see him in the morning. When I got up in the morning, he was already left for work. We had dinner at 5 o'clock. Every night on the dot, which is why I do not eat at 5 o'clock now. Every night, because he had to leave to go to Jeff.
Go over to Jeff.
Came home, sat down with the family. We had a meal. What's new? See ya, gone. And I'm asleep by the time he gets home.
Wow.
For years, yeah.
And that's what. So you gonna read that poem?
Sure, I'll read it.
Gotta have that one. I'm gonna read along with you.
Ambition. He'd longed to savor the rivers of the Grenadines in his mouth. Another taste of fancy, taste of moss and green lizard. To smell the balm of honeybees, Apis mellifera, in their rookery of parallel combs. But two mad boys, much too ambitious to be men, set upon my father as he entered the night school's John. These rowdies battered him on the most complex curve of his head, then made off with his children's allowance.
Wow.
This attack on a part-time teacher didn't make the 10 o'clock news, and Daddy's hospital stay was brief. When he came home, Mother prepared his favorites, roast lamb with red potatoes and thyme, almond-dressed green beans, sweet cakes pearled with lemon, and left over, all he would never again taste or smell. He ate nothing but air at all our meals after.
Good Lord.
I'm so glad you like that one, because I do like honoring the two things that always stick out in my mind. Daddy wanted to go back to the islands. My mother wasn't having it.
Yeah.
And this thing that happened to him, where it was like everything was taken from him, his homeland, his something as basic as taste and smell.
I know it. You said that they hit him on the most complex curve of his head. That is just devastating.
It's devastating.
Of all the places to get hit.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, on some level you can say, well, just kill me.
Yeah.
Why would you remove, you know, first, why hit me?
Well,
I'm
why
trying
hit me
to
at all?
educate
Yeah. Take my little bit of money, whatever little bit of money he had in his wallet, and I'm here trying to educate people, and this is what happened.
Hey, what is Fancy?
There's a river called Fancy on St. Vincent.
Wow.
Yeah.
So he just wanted to dive in there.
Yeah. He just
wanted
to
up
go
for
home.
air swimming.
Yeah.
How long had he been here?
He came in 1923.
Gee whiz.
And
so he was already 40 years in L.A.
Yeah, at that point.
In the States.
Yeah. Came to Brooklyn like most West Indians of the time did. And then to Chicago, then to L.A. But he always wanted to go back. And my mother said, I don't think so.
Wow.
I'm raising my children here.
I thought that was food, but I love that. And it could be something.
You could think
for
of it
me,
like
in my
that,
head, it could be an apple or something like that. But so he just wanted to have another taste of that river.
Of that river.
And he wanted to be home.
He wanted to be home. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, you're saying it.
That he wanted to be home.
And just the bees. You threw some Latin up in there,
well,
too.
that's the fun, right, of poetry, right? Is when you say, okay, what else do they call bees?
Yeah.
Apis mellifera.
Yeah,
and it fits into the music of the line. Apis mellifera in their rookery of parallel combs, right? So that's my little research line, man. My little research line there. But
so, did you ever witness any of his own sense of his loss?
Oh yeah, that? I mean, so it's like everything was taken from him.
Everything.
You know.
That's why I love that second line. He longed to save it. How often do we get to use that word?
Yeah.
He longed.
Yeah. Well, and that's from you and I have both studied with Cecilia. Look for that language that isn't used as much. And it's not that it's such a $10 word. It's that people don't really talk about longing that much. Yes. And it's the perfect kind of word for what he was feeling. It wasn't just, gee, I'd like to go there, or it was a deep desire in him to go back.
And he never
he went back for visits,
but never
never to. Well, they had gone during the Depression, and my mother said he was an electronics engineer as well as a teacher.
Gosh.
And Mother said, he went down there thinking he was going to fix everybody's radio. She said, there's only one problem. There's only one radio on the island. So your father take it apart, he put it back together. He take it apart, he put it back together. There's no money in making that money.
I don't think I've ever heard you really do your home accent.
My home accent. So
look at the wasted IQ of folk from other places coming here.
Right. And the assumption that they
they're so demonized and disrespected because they got an accent
because
or
they
something
have an
like
accent,
that.
Or it's not even like you're from Jamaica. St. Vincent, where the heck is that?
Yeah.
So it was unfortunate, but he never let it faze him. He never let it stop him.
Yeah.
He just, when he became an engineer, I remember saying to Mom, "How is that possible?" And she said, completely straight face, she said, "Oh, he read a book."
Wow.
I said, well, she said, well, I mean, it's all in the book. You just figure it out. And that was just kind of how they proceeded. Mm-hmm. But it was interesting to me that you chose that because when I was reading your Malcolm poem, I was thinking, I was dealing with a personal history in, trying to intertwine a little bit of public history, but yours definitely relies on a public history. And the first question that I had was, well, first of all, would you read it, the next Malcolm poem?
Sure. Yeah, you made me think of my dad, too, before I shift. But seriously, because Pops could fix daggone almost anything.
Exactly. And how did these guys learn this?
Yeah, and he never, so my dad never went to high school, period.
Yeah.
But I've been learning a lot. So his father was a what do they call him? A Finnish carpenter.
Okay.
So this dude built a house outside of Richmond. I just reconfirmed that with my cousin the other day.
Right.
Like a two-story crib.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know how he did it.
Right.
But he was so old and had stroked out by the time
Right.
I met him, and I was so nervous because he had vitiligo. And his voice sounded like this. I was scared shit of him, to be honest. But you learn these things about your elders.
About your elders.
And that's what it was there are tragic things in my dad's history that I don't. Some of them I don't even know.
Right. They never talked about it.
Yeah,
They were very, as you said, you started out talking about humility.
Yeah.
Nobody was going to build anything for these guys. They didn't have a lot of money.
That's right.
If any money. And they just had to figure it out themselves.
Yeah.
I mean, the first house, I was adopted.
Okay.
And the first house I lived in with my family, my older brother said they drove out to Monterey Park or somewhere and got a house and put it on the back of a truck, brought it over to Virgil Avenue.
Wow.
Kept the boys up all night laying the foundation. They're up at 3 o'clock in the morning. Dad, I'm sleepy. He said, no, we got to put this house. Take the house off the back of the truck.
Wow.
And set it on the foundation. I said, what kind of gerrymandered made thing is that? They said, it was a house.
Yeah.
And that's where we live.
Industriousness.
We'll figure out a way to have
and
a
it's
house.
our job
to record that.
To record it and capture the mythological character of that kind of existence.
Exactly.
That's the way I look at it.
Exactly.
Because if you rely on other people
to tell the story,
first they're going to get it wrong. And if it's more ideologically driven, they will dehumanize
it. As Toni Morrison said, if there's a story you want to read and it hasn't been written, you need to write it. You need to write it.
And you need to find the angles that you can enter to tell the story so that it resonates.
That's what you did.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping. Okay, so this is called the next Malcolm poem. The next Malcolm poem celebrates the last midnight. A father took quiet, giant steps through the moonlit halls of his home. His whispers, a bedtime flute, soothing the breath of his sleeping daughters. Humming Mona Lisa as he tiptoes back into their mother's arms, places his spectacles on the nightstand, nestles into her drowsy eyes, brushes her cheeks as he pulls the covers up to her open throat, kissing her mouth to pass on secrets he learned from his dreaming girls. The next Malcolm poem celebrates the first morning the hero's wife took healing giant steps onto the road past memory toward eternity. Her whispers, a Coltrane soprano soloing up the spine of her sheltered daughters, humming Naima as she weans them from grief, floats out of widowhood, dedicated to the ones she loves, steels herself against fantastic first-name justifications, steeps herself in the spicy occasion she chose life over death, willing another set of fingerprints to the biographers who come to praise the name Shabazz.
I think this is just so amazing. And one of the first questions that came to me, I'm interested in the impetus for this poem. I have to assume Malcolm was assassinated in 65, so I have to assume this was written well after that.
Oh, sure.
And I wondered what caused you to write this particular poem at the time that you first started to draft.
You know, see, these things aren't linear for me anymore, if they ever were, but I know for now.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm very close to my kids in general.
Right.
You never met my
Right.
son,
I
don't
never
think,
met your
but
son,
you know
no.
my daughter,
Right.
and we're very close.
Right.
So, you know, I have over the years, you know, thought about the wholeness of people like Mr. Shabazz, people like Dr. King. How do they, you know, maintain a sense of humanity as we revere them?
Right. Right.
I think people think about that a little more now. And in fact, King birthdays, Malcolm birthdays, now I see photos on Instagram of them with their kids.
With their kids.
Smiling, all that.
Exactly.
I've been thinking about this stuff since the 80s.
Right.
Maybe earlier, frankly, because I grew up very ideological. When I got out of Howard, I segued right into ideological growth and hustle, really.
Yeah.
I had babies very
Right,
early,
right,
so I
right,
was
right.
looking for ways to be relevant
Right,
almost
right.
until I realized that learning how to change diapers and handling that
It's
business
very
as
relevant.
a dad is really quite
Yeah.
that's the biggest form of literacy you can have. Is
Exactly.
treating your kids with humanity
Right.
and really raising them.
Right.
But yeah, so it's not linear. I have no idea, but something. I can definitely say that when the movie X and when the young people, Public Enemy and other people especially,
Right.
everybody was wearing the X hat. This
Right.
is 90s.
Right.
And I had read essays by Miss Shabazz, an
Right.
essay by Miss Shabazz about him being how funny Malcolm was.
Right. Right.
How dedicated he was as a dad. And it turns out also, this is the goodness truth, in the 80s I used to publish a magazine about black fathers.
Okay.
It's called Genetic Dancers.
I love it. I
You
never
know how
knew
we
that.
do it. We're going to have to have some joy in it. But
Absolutely.
so I got a chance. One of my former mates at Howard introduced me to a guy who used to take pictures of Malcolm.
Oh my
And,
goodness.
and for a while, I never got to publish this issue. And I told you this is not linear. All this leads to this. This guy, his name was Robert Haggins,
Okay.
sent me a manila envelope full of photographs of Malcolm and his children.
Oh my God. Do you still have it?
I do in my files. I don't
Oh
know.
my God.
Point is, all
that was
through the
goes through
the
yeah.
gestation
Exactly.
is me thinking about what should the next Malcolm poem be?
Exactly. Well, that was going to be how the word next.
There you go.
Was what was fascinating to me, among
Yes.
other things, about this
Yes.
poem and the structure of it. And I wondered, did you write both stanzas or kind of conceive them at the same time, or did the first stanza come and then maybe a little later the second stanza, or maybe you
Yeah.
wrote the second stanza first and then when you ultimately published it, you flipped it? Because it would be so. It wouldn't surprise someone if you went with the first stanza only, but what makes the poem
Yeah, you're right.
complete is to focus on Betty's
Yes.
post-Malcolm life.
Well,
And when
ooh,
you
you gave me
say,
a chill about my
you
own
know,
stuff.
steps herself in the spicy occasions, she chose
Yeah,
life
absolutely.
over death. She could have crumbled when he did and said, I got these little baby girls I got to raise. He expects me. And I expect myself.
that's
So
right.
that really comes through to me. And so I was just curious whether you kind of knew early on or you kind of played with it and said, no, it isn't complete, it needs something else.
Yeah, good. I see. I don't even think about these things.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that the first stanza was written first.
Right.
I do remember is that there was no way to write the next poem
Right.
because I tried, I'm sure in my youth, in my ideological youth, I wrote my Malcolm poem. All of us had to
Well,
write one.
yeah, and I'm so glad you said
All
that
of us had
because
them. All dudes.
I
at
was
least.
talking to the poet Patricia Smith, who's a good friend of mine.
Yeah.
And we were talking about doing a reading together or something. So I said, well, maybe I'll read my Harriet Tubman poem. She said, every Negro got to have their obligatory Harriet Tubman poem, right?
If you do, you got to find your angle.
You've got to find your angle, right? Yeah. And my Malcolm poem is, Malcolm comes to L.A. in, he was killed in 63 or 64, to give the eulogy for a Muslim that was killed by the police outside of a mosque.
That's right.
He goes to the barber shop that my brothers go to.
Oh, come on.
So, and I'm sending them questions. Well, I don't remember. Then I start to really pluck their memory, right? And when Dennis said that the thing he said to the barberette, I called her the barberette, was he said, I don't want to look like I need a haircut, but I also don't want to look like I just had one. I said, well, I'm definitely putting that in the poem.
That is
and
amazing.
Also, Dennis asking him, he said everybody in the place was kind of like, oh, that's the man, right? Dennis said, what are we to think about everything that's going on in the world? He said, we are a violent people. So those are the two quotes that I wanted to put in. Yeah. But to do it in this milieu of the barbershop, which is, we know iconic for black folks, that's where you get your information, all of that sort of stuff. To have him come in that moment into the barbershop.
That's the point to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Of any of these types of
any
poems,
of these kinds of forms.
Is you see the humanity of the folk. Your dad's humanity,
exactly.
Mr. X's, Mr. Malcolm's poem, Mr. Bowser's poetry, humanity.
Right.
How could you not? This is the thing, as a dude of consciousness and witness, I kept saying, why are we reinventing Brother Malcolm? Let him rest.
Let him rest and
do your homework.
Tell all of him in all of his humanity, the good, the bad, the ugly, the ups, the downs.
Exactly.
He's with his wife, he's not with, whatever it was. So all of those kinds of stories, that whether they're about public personages or more importantly to me, people that we know or that are part of our family, so that these little knuckleheads behind us, I don't know, or whatever, and it's been interesting to see the transformation as I've started to write these family stories in all of my books. I would call my brothers, I don't remember, I wasn't there, whatever. Over time, they'll call me, they say, Lynne, remember when you asked? I thought about that the other day, and it was this. And some of the little ones said, Tanty Lynne, Daddy said you're the only one who knows about the islands. I said, well, no, they know. But they don't remember, and they said, call your Tanty Lynne, she'll tell you the stories.
You become this
So
scribe.
I've become like the family griot. Right?
Yes, exactly.
So one of the nephews, when my brother died a couple years ago, one of the nephews, I'm telling these family stories at the funeral. Wow. And one of the nephews says, well, when Auntie Lynne dies, I said, am I going somewhere? I mean, when Auntie Lynne dies, I want to be the griot. I said, you know what's involved in being a griot?
Right.
He said, well, I know we're having a good time now. I said, it's not about a good time.
Yeah.
I said, it's about listening.
Come on.
It's about, and I wrote that poem. It's about listening, just as you said.
Man, okay, come on. You got to read the poem again. I got to hear it again.
The ambition poem?
Yes, because I want to hear it. I don't even want to read it now. I just want to hear it.
Ambition. He'd longed to savor the rivers of the Grenadines in his mouth. Another taste of fancy, taste of moss and green lizard. To smell the balm of honeybees, Apis mellifera, in their rookery of parallel combs. But two mad boys, much too ambitious to be men, set upon my father as he entered the night school's John. Wow. These rowdies battered him on the most complex curve of his head, then made off with his children's allowance. Wow. This attack on a part-time teacher didn't make the 10 o'clock news, and Daddy's hospital stay was brief. When he came home, Mother prepared his favorites: roast lamb with red potatoes and thyme, almond-dressed green beans, sweet cakes pearled with lemon, and left over, all he would never again taste or smell. He ate nothing but air at all our meals after.